"Every ever after in this town wishes we were dead," Sabrina said. "Why would you want to help us?" "I have my reasons." "I'm confused," Daphne said. "Why would Jack bring us here and tell us the story about you being the bad guy? And why did he want to stay in contact with thieves if he was just going to take off?" Sabrina said, handing Charming her walkie-talkie. "Because if he kept you busy, he could go back to your house," the prince said. "But he can't get in. He doesn't have the keys," Sabrina replied. "He doesn't need the keys," Daphne gasped. "We didn't say goodbye to the house when we left. We used the ruby slippers. The house is unlocked." Hampstead in his human form came rushing out of that mansion. "I've got the deputies chasing the giant," he said. "He's heading into the woods in the direction of Widow's Peak." "Good job," Charlie said. "The sheriff being wolf-fried. We've also searched the grounds. There's no sign of Jack," Hampstead continued. "But we did find this." He held out Jack's bloody handkerchief. "So the giant would smell him and come running," Charming said. "You might as well join your men, Sheriff. The girls and I will call you if we need you." "Where are you going?" Hampstead asked. The prince took Sabrina's arm and urged Daphne to do the same. "We're going back to this grim house. I have an unsettling notion of what our giant killer is up to," Charming said. Sabrina clicked her heels together. "There's no place like home. There's no place like home. There's no place like home." Instantly, the girls and Charming were standing outside of Granny's house. The front door was wide open, and through the doorway they could see that Jack had ransacked their home. They walked inside. Bookshelves were tipped over, furniture was overturned, and even couch cushions were thrown aside. He had searched through every kitchen cupboard, empty closets, and destroyed antiques. But his crimes against the house wasn't what was bothering Sabrina. What hurt her was that she had been tricked. In the last year and a half, Sabrina had learned to be street smart and savvy. She was the one who was supposed to pull fast ones on people. She was the queen of the sneaks, and she had been suckered. Suddenly, the telephone rang. She picked up the receiver and said, "Hello." "Hello, this is Wilma Fay of Action 4 News. I'm following up on a tip we got about a half hour ago. Mr. Englishman said there will be a murder on Widow's Peak tonight. We've already got a camera crew on their way, but we were hoping we might be able to speak to Mr. Englishman first," the woman begged. "No, he's not here," Sabrina replied. "Well, if you see him, please tell him that we are very intrigued by the story and will have a camera team and reporter there as he requested," the woman continued. Then, with a click, she hung up. "There was a reporter," Sabrina said. "Jack called them and told them there was going to be a murder on Widow's Peak tonight." "This is exactly what I was trying to prevent. He's going to kill a giant on television so he can be famous again," Charming said. "When the world sees that, this little town will be turned upside down by reporters. There's too much here to explain. We've got to stop him." "Elvis!" Daphne cried suddenly. The giant dog was nowhere to be seen. Daphne shouted his name and, after several painful moments of silence, a low bark could be heard from upstairs. Daphne rushed up the steps, followed by Sabrina and Charming. She threw open the door to Mira's room and found Elvis lying on the floor in a small puddle of his own blood. He had a serious cut on his belly, but he barked happily when he saw the girls. Daphne knelt down and kissed the dog gently on his nose. When she lifted her face, tears were pouring down her cheeks. "He hurt Elvis," the little girl sobbed. "Girls, we have to find Jack," Charming said coldly. "We don't have time for this mongrel." Sabrina and Daphne looked at the man as if he were a moldy sandwich that had slowly turned to soup in the bottom of the refrigerator. The prince groaned and took his cell phone from his pocket. He dialed a number and sighed impatiently. "Mr. Seven, I need you to send one of the three to the Grimm house. The door is open so they can come right in. There's a dog that needs medical assistance." "Yes, a dog. A dog. "No, Mr. Seven, I don't know what's wrong with him. Maybe a broken rib." "No, Mr. Seven." "Yes, Mr. Seven. Mr. Seven, if you don't stop asking me questions, I'm going to feed you to this dog." Sabrina eyed the man suspiciously, and Charming caught her gaze. and Mr. Seven, my orders are that whichever one of the witches comes should respect this house," Charming added. "No snooping." Daphne wrapped her arms around the prince's neck and hugged him as he hung up his phone. "Thank you," she sobbed, and for a brief moment Charming seemed to enjoy the hug, but then he pulled away from her. "You're ruining my suit," he replied, wiping his light lapel clean of the girl's tears. "We should check the mirror." Sabrina gazed over at it. The little man who was usually its reflection was missing. "Mirror!" Charming shouted. "You have to step through it," said Sabrina. "I'm aware of how it works," the prince said impatiently. "I used to be engaged to one of its former owners." He stepped into the reflection and disappeared. Sabrina followed closely behind, leaving Daphne to nurse Elvis. The little man known as Mirror was lying on his side on the cold marble floor, barely conscious and covered in bruises. Charming knelt down to him and lifted the pudgy man's head. Mirror slowly opened his eyes and grimaced in pain. "He was too strong and fast for me. I couldn't stop him," Mirror groaned. "What did he take?" Charming asked. "I tried to fight him off, but he just laughed at me." "You wouldn't believe how quick he is," Mirror complained. "Focus, man. We need to know if Jack took anything." "He took the beans," Mirror replied. "How? He doesn't have a key," Sabrina asked, reaching into her pocket and pulling out Granny's keyring. "I've got to remind you to lock the door after you let him take a peek at the jar," said the little man. "I don't get it," Sabrina said. "If killing the giant will make him famous again, what does he want with the beans?" "It's insurance. If his fame starts to fade, he'll let another giant out with another one of those beans. The giant will kill people and destroy things, and a giant will come to the rescue," Charming explained. "But how is he going to find the giant in the first place?" Sabrina asked. "We haven't been able to find him, and he is 200 feet tall." "He's not going to have to find it. It's going to find him," Charming answered. "Giants have a great sense of smell, especially when it comes to blood. That's why the giant showed up at the mansion. Jack left his bloody handkerchief and the giant could smell it. It's amazing, really, that they can smell anything over their own stink. If one touches you, you can't wash off the odor for weeks." Suddenly, Sabrina thought of the 2 pieces of fabric Elvis had brought into the room just before the group had left for Charming's mansion. One was Granny Willard's cloth from the giant, the other was a piece of Jack's pants. Elvis was trying to warn us that Jack had been near a giant, Sabrina realized. She was a terrible detective. She couldn't recognize a clue when it was offered to her by a 200-pound Great Dane. She wanted to kick herself, but she had to focus on what Charming had said. "But if giants have such great noses, why didn't this one attack us here? Jack was in our house for hours," she said to Charming. "Protection spells. If Rhoda is anything, she's careful. We have one in the jailhouse too," he replied. "So, what are we going to do?" "Mirror, I'm going to need something," Charming said. Sabrina unlocked the door labeled Magical Armory and let the prince inside. The room was filled with all types of weapons, bows and arrows, swords, a nasty-looking pole with a spiky metal ball attached by a chain, and hundreds of others. Some things were obviously magical, as they glowed or hummed, but most were just shining with horrible possibilities. Charming pointed to a sword on the wall. "That's the one," he said. Mirror hobbled into the room with a worried face. "I find this very unwise. There is already one ever after running around with magic. This town does not need a second, especially with Excalibur, and any person whose skin is pierced by its blade is a goner. Even a tiny scratch will kill you." Sabrina took the sword off the wall and held it in her hand. It was long and wide, with a jewel-encrusted handle. An odd tingle raced through her when she held it with both hands. She felt powerful. The weight came off and must have felt when Excalibur belonged to him. "Sabrina, is there someone you can trust?" Mirror asked. "No, he's not," she said. "I've heard what this town thinks of my family and what my death might mean for your freedom. How do I know you won't just stab me in the back when I'm not looking?" "Grim, I am not your friend," Charles said. "I resent your family for the life they have forced me to live for the last 200 years, and I resent you for the future that you represent. And if I were doing this for your welfare study, you would probably be right. But I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for me. As much as Baba Yaga's spell has trapped me in Fairyport Landing, it has also benefited me. I have power here. I have wealth and respect. If Jack shows the world that giants and fairy tales are real, life in this town will change, and my position as its mayor, might be challenged. Therefore, you and I are in an unusual situation. Tonight, I'm your ally, and I will help you save your grandmother and Candace. If that is the only solution, then so be it. But rest assured, Grim, tomorrow I am your enemy again. Sabrina looked up into his eyes and saw that he was being honest, even if his brand of honesty made her sick to the stomach. Could she trust him? She reached into her pocket, took out a picture of her family, and gazed at their faces. Her mother and father, Mr. Tennis, and finally Granny Rhoda. She had to do something to get the old woman back. She wasn't going to lose her family all over again. She took the heavy sword and handed it to him. Miro continued to protest, limping along as Charming and Sabrina exited the room and returned to the mirror. Daphne was waiting for them with Elvis. They gently carried the dog into the hallway, and as Sabrina carefully locked the door to Miro's room. "You stay here with Elvis," Sabrina ordered her sister. "No way!" Daphne cried. "We're Grimms. This is what we do." "This is dangerous." "Whatever," the little girl said, grabbing Sabrina's hand tightly. Sabrina surrendered, hooked her finger into Charming's pocket, and clipped Dorothy's shoes together. "There's no place like where Jack is," she said. "Sabrina, wouldn't these shoes take us to wherever Mom and Dad are?" Daphne wondered aloud. Sabrina's eyes grew wide with possibility. "We can save them next," her sister said happily. "All right," Sabrina said, clicking her heels together. "There's no place like where Jack is. There's no place like where Jack is." Lights went out, and the familiar squeaky wheeze filled Sabrina's ears. In a split second, Charming and the girls were standing in the woods on Widow's Peak. They had little time to adjust to their new surroundings. Sabrina looked above her and saw the giant's massive foot preparing to crush them all. They managed to leap out of the way, but the aftershock tossed them around as if they were on a sinking ship. The ground split apart, sending stones and soil into a gaping crevice where the group had once stood. The giant leaned down to get a better look at the three people scurrying at his feet. He reached to snatch them, but a flaming arrow zipped from the tree line and landed in the side of the giant's face. The monster cried in pain as he plucked it from his cheek, only to have a second and third arrow pierce his chin. "Stop it, Jack," Sabrina commanded. "There are people in the giant's pocket, and if you kill him, they'll die when he falls." Jack peeked his head out from behind some branches in a nearby tree and laughed. "Oh, it's not time to kill him yet," Jack shouted, remaining safely hidden in the trees. "I'm just trying to get him good and angry." "We know about the reporters, Jack," Charming said. "We're never going to let that happen." Jack fired several more arrows into the giant's face, landing a painful shot to the monster's lower lip. The giant raged as he tried to pluck it out. While the giant was busy, the young man dropped out of the tree and landed as nimbly as a cat. "Blimey, Charming and the Grimms on the same side. I never thought I'd live to see the day," he said. "Has the prince turned traitor like that worthless mongrel Canis?" "The only allegiance I have is to myself," Charming said, as he waved Excalibur in the air. "Now, we can do this the easy way or the hard way, but the result will be the same. You're going back to jail." "Sorry, Prince, but I spent my last day in the Fairyport Landing lockup. My fans await," Jack said, loading another arrow into his bow and firing it at the giant. It pierced the skin between two fingers of the giant's left hand, and he shrieked. Overcome with rage, the giant swept his arm across the tops of the forest trees, cracking many ancient cedars in half. Well, it appears that this will be the